Hello, MMA community, YouTubers, UFC fans, and Fighting Guru fans. This episode is especially for the Fighting Guru fans, more important than anybody else because I'm releasing this segment very close to the event that's about to start. Today, UFC 264, Dustin versus Poirier, Part 3. The Trilogy will be out and starting in the next few hours. So we're very close to that event today, Saturday, July 10th. And only the hardcore Fighting Guru fans and followers and supporters of the channel will benefit from this because you guys all this time have been doing what I asked you to do, which was hit the reminder bells. Notifications will appear and subscribe to the channel. So for you who have done that, the subscribers and the guys hitting the reminder bells, which I assume are doing the other stuff, the likes and comments as well, I wanted to give you guys a reward, a gift, a token of my appreciation by releasing this video for you guys to benefit from more than anybody else who doesn't have that set up, because by the time they see this, it may be too late already. Okay, so in this video, I'm also going to put in a hidden parlay, but I'm going to keep it for 5 seconds instead of 3 seconds so you can find it even faster. And I'm going to shorten this up. We're not going to have a full breakdown. This is going to be a partial breakdown, especially because one of the fights that I'm going to talk about, I've already broken this fighter down. We've been doing this. Channel's been around for so long that we're starting to repeat the same fighters over and over. So there's no sense in me re-saying all the same things about them that I said the last time. So I'll just brief it up. Long story short, today we're going to do 2 fights in one. I'm going to give you guys the Jennifer Maia and Jessica I prediction and breakdown. And I'm also going to do the main event, which is one that we always have to do on the channel. The main event is the one fight that I'm always going to give you guys. Okay, so with that said, then let's start with the Jessica Maia fight. Jessica Maia is a girl who's very, very strong for her division. You can see it even with a girl like Shevchenko, the Bullet. She was having success, and Shevchenko usually bullies her opponents. She's fought in the higher weight classes. Again, she's had very competitive fights against the GOAT of women's MMA, Amanda Nunes. A lot of people even say that she had one of her losses was very controversial. They think that a lot of people think that she was robbed at the scorecards. The decision should have gone to her. Until today, she tells the media and the people in the interviews that she believes she won that other fight against Nunes, so that she should be tied with her at this point. I don't know what she feels like, but she says something about that. She had won one of the fights and the judges screwed her. But if you remember in my last breakdown, I have a timestamp in the comment section. You can go back. It was the Figueiredo versus Perez pay-per-view. And I put in the comment section about 1 minute and 9 seconds. I gave you into the video. I gave you guys a prop bet that was paying plus 375 for Shevchenko to win by decision. She was going to win by decision. I was convinced of it because Maia is a girl who's super durable. She's very strong. She's built good for her physique is very big and wide for the division. She's usually, after blowing back up, which is the thing we're going to talk about again in this I'll remember to mention that after they step off the scales, fighters typically go back and start rehydrating starting from the second they're off the scales, like we seen Conor. Anybody who watched the full weigh-in scales videos, you saw the second Conor got off the scales, he went straight to chug gallons of water. So he was blowing back up. But Conor's a guy who's on his best day, like with a wet t-shirt or wet blanket over him, soaking wet. He'll never go above 170. His maximum weight is like 169. Do you remember when he tried to increase, he was eating, he wasn't weight cutting to fight against Nate Diaz in their rematch fight? He had to get to 170. He weighed in on the day of weigh-ins after trying his best to gain weight. He didn't even hit the 170 mark. He was, I think, at 169, if I'm not mistaken. So that just goes to show, and you can see it in his physique, his bone density, his structure. He's not a fat guy. He's never been a chubby guy. He's always been, he went from skinny to ripped, shredded. He's never in his life been a big guy. Where Dustin Poirier, which is another fight, I've already broken down both of these guys more than once, and this specific fight where they're fighting each other already. In that last video I did where I broke down part 2, my channel wasn't around for part 1, so but part 2, that was a different weight class. That fight should not even be discussed as relevant for this fight. Not only was it against a Dustin Poirier and a Conor McGregor that are nothing like the persons that they are today. One is more improved. The other one, we've seen him less of a good MMA fighter. He's a better boxer. He screwed himself up. One of the problems with Conor is by just switching over to boxing for so long, preparing for Pacquiao, having his set high hopes on fighting against Pacquiao, training for Pacquiao. He was training for Pacquiao for a while too, training for Mayweather. You started to do things that are repetitive as a boxer. That doesn't work in MMA. So he forgot. It's like when you're learning a new language, and then when you started to learn the basics, then you started to work on learning a different language before you got to perfect and master and be fluent in the first language you were learning. What that will do is mess up, and you'll start to forget how to use the first language because you started to learn and mix yourself up with the second language. That's what he kind of did with his body. His physical body started to use repetitive responses and movement of one of a boxer, not an MMA fighter. So he hurt himself. That was his, nobody can say it was a bad idea or it was foolish. He made millions and he's the man he is today, successful billionaire almost, because of that. So, but there was a cost to it. It didn't come at a free price. It wasn't a free thing. It came at a cost, and that's the cost. Is it turned him into a less good of an MMA fighter. Okay, so besides that, let's factor this in. Have you seen pictures of Dustin Poirier from high school, grammar school, right out of high school? He was a big guy. He looked like he could have played as a front lineman in the football team. He could have been like an offensive line tackle, front line tackle, where Conor looked more like a wide receivers type of body when he was younger. And you can see them even at the weigh-ins when they're standing directly next to each other on the second. Look at the picture on the second stare downs when they did a rematch, the second fight at the ceremonial face-offs, when he showed him his bottle of hot sauce, and then he grabbed it from him and Conor put his arm around him. When you put them next to each other, like it looks like they're attached by the hips, like Siamese twins or whatever they call that. When they're next to each other, you see the difference in structure, in width, in muscle, in every. Conor is naturally, when they blow back up, Conor is about at least two, almost 3 weight classes smaller than Dustin Poirier. They have different limitations to how big they can get. Because Conor is limited and maxed out at around 169, 170. His body's not built for anything bigger than that. That's just how big he is. And that's the most we've ever seen him. Where Dustin, on the other hand, there's a reason why he was asking and pleading with UFC to turn this fight into a fight at 170. They were going to do it at 170 because he requested it from them, knowing that got the advantage. The only reason why he was able to absorb those shots, those huge big shots he ate that most of the time put people away. If you remember, even Conor said this about Nate Diaz when they fought at 170 in his post-fight. After the fight was over and he was getting questioned by the media about what happened, he's like, usually guys crumble when I hit them with those shots, but Nate was able to keep taking it and still go forward, and he stuck around the whole time. He was able to, he said, because I wasn't planning properly in the first Nate Diaz fight, I thought I can just exhilarate all my power, all my energy into all my shots early on, because nobody can ever take those shots and stick around. So I wasn't worried about pacing myself for the whole 5 rounds, because I've never had to go that far. When I connect, people fall and the fights are over. Where this time in the second fight with Nate Diaz, he realized that Nate Diaz can take his shots really well. So he stopped looking for the head hunting. He wasn't no longer head hunting, and he was no longer going 110% with his shots. He was pulling back some so that he could conserve some of his cardio and energy for the later rounds, where he knew where he knew Nate would still be around. But now the problem with that in a fight like this is, if he was able to eat your bigger shots and he was able to start to walk you down as early as the second round, and the longer you're in a fight with Dustin, anybody will tell you this, his own coaches are gonna, if they're smart, they'll tell him this. They'll tell him that, I'll call you back. I'm in the middle of recording something. All right. His own coaches are going to tell him that the longer he's in this fight against Poirier, the worse it's going to be. The more shots he'll land in his opportunities he'll find to kick his lower leg, the more takedowns, the more submission attempts, the more just naturally, Dustin Poirier is a guy who never, we don't see, not only do we never see him start off too crazy out of the gate, he's a slow starter, and he uses his good movement, his angles, and there's a name, the people in his gym and his coaches, they call it the Dustin shift. He shifts in angles where he stays out of harm's way for long enough where he knows in the later rounds, if he can save that energy and not go through the first 1 or 2 rounds at full pace, that when he starts to notice his opponent starting to fade away now because he was going at full pace, that's when he psychologically messes with them during the middle of the fight. Stuff like pointing at him, and just when he starts to pick up the pace, when he's starting to go from 4 strikes landed per minute to 7 or 8, he's doubling his pace, while the other guy's realizing that he's slowing down, he's starting to mouth breathe, and he's going from 4 or 5 per minute to only 1 or 2, so he's cutting in half. And then he's noticing that the opponent's doubling it becomes a mind F. He's effed his mind up so bad during the middle of the fight. Now you're going to see a desperate opponent, a guy who's headhunting, who's catching kicks, who's doing things that he's not using his fundamentals, he's not using his strategy, he's panicking and being desperate he'll shoot and he'll do stuff that he never should have done and would have done if he was calm, cool, collective, and focused on the game plan at hand. That first part, plan A, will be out the window. Plan B will be out the window. He'll go into desperation mode, and that's when you start making mistakes. And in a game of inches at the highest level against the guy who's ranked number 1, a future champion, an interim title champion guy, you can't make mistakes. Not even one mistake. It's about who makes the first mistake. Sometimes that determines who's going to win the fight and who's going to lose the fight. So, okay, now let's focus on this. Last time that they fought, you can tell when they blew back up, when they're rehydrated, that he was way bigger than Conor, right? That time they were fighting in Abu Dhabi. That was like do you remember when Conor left the arena? You can see footage. He was going into his his Mercedes or Rolls Royce, one of those like nice cars, picked him up. It was still broad daylight. When the event was over with, by the time he was done icing, several hours later, it was still broad daylight because they fought at like 6 in the morning in the States. It was like 5 or 6 in the morning while they were fighting. That means this time he's going to have a full extra day after, and they're the main event. There's going to be 13, 12 other fights before them, and he's not fighting early in the day. He's going to have an extra full day of blowing back up from the time that after they've stepped off the scales. And a big important thing is, Dustin, keep this in mind. He was the first guy up on the scales. That says a lot, that he came prepared and that he had no trouble with weight cutting. He was good. He looked good. He did a strong flex. He was moving very well. He wasn't slow and he wasn't unbalanced. He didn't go straight to chugging water like Conor did. So him being the first guy up on the official scales, the guy who was the first one ready to weigh in, no need for like the wall of shame. He was on perfect weight, shows like where he's at in preparation. Like Jorge Masvidal said it as well, that he never stopped. He knew he ended his last fight camp and didn't go into like celebrations and like junk food. He went straight into his next camp knowing that this fight was going to be coming up next. And Jorge even said he never seen him start the camp already in shape. He usually sees him come in kind of out of shape and then slowly get into shape. He's like, this is the first time I've seen him start in shape. So he's like, he's going to kill somebody. And I believe him because it's not just now he's going to be even bigger than he was in the last fight. He's got this mental edge. He has over Conor what Conor had over him in their first fight. Okay, now forget everything I said. Pretend none of that existed. Pretend none of it was real. Pretend they didn't fight later on and they did fight again at 5 in the morning. Forget that he's not, let's say he's not mentally the one who's winning the warfare and the one that doesn't look like he's desperate to remake like recreate a false like crazy gimmick or persona or crazy madman that he used to be. And he's not the one that has to play out of character to boast himself and make himself feel good and confident. He's just being himself, and that is good enough to see the confidence oozing off him. So by being himself, his natural being, his natural person, his personality, his character, the person he is 24 hours a day is confident in knowing that he's going to be the better man. He's going to get the win. And now that means 23 hours and 30 minutes of the rest of the time when Conor's not playing that guy he was playing at the press conference, Conor doesn't have that confidence. Conor's got quite the opposite. Conor's at home texting, first guy to shoots is the Dusty B. Do you think that was the guy who created that message, that plan, that idea of sending that message? Do you think that's the thought, or that's a kind of a message a guy who's confident in knowing he's going to get the win would ever even think of? You think Dustin would ever say, hey, the first guy who throws a left punch is a Dusty? Do you think knowing how dangerous his opponent's left hook is, left punches, do you think it ever dawned on Dustin to tell him to find a way to stop him from using it? He welcomes it. He knows that even last fight, he took his best shot and kept going. And that's another thing I wanted to say about the girl I was just mentioning, Jessica I's opponent, Jennifer Maia. She's like the Nick Diaz of women's MMA. You can hit her with everything you got, throw everything with the kitchen sink at her. She'll still keep marching forward, coming in, pressuring you and sucking your air out of and forcing you to be uncomfortable when you throw shots and not fight at your own game and at your own pace, but hers. She's very good at that, pressuring and forward, and that looks great on the judges' scorecards. That in itself, it's enough to make in a close fight, the judges will say, you know what? She may have landed a few more strikes, but the whole time we saw Jennifer going forward, walking her down, controlling the octagon. We'll give it to Maia. So that's one thing she does very well. And having the strength advantage, the BJJ advantage, the grappling advantage, and being the more powerful one of the two, there's too many important advantages that Maia has. And I mean, she just came off of a fight with the best in the whole division, the current champion. She was a challenger for the belt, so that just shows how high level and she did well. She even won she won the second round over Shevchenko. She beat Shevchenko one of those rounds and was able to hang with her for the rest of the 4 other rounds that she didn't win. She was fine. She didn't not once look like she was in ever any major danger. She was never in any, and we've seen what Shevchenko did to her next opponent, Claudia Gadelha, I always get her confused with Jessica Andrade. But we've seen what happened to Shevchenko's next opponent. She starched her right out of the gate. So, and that's a tough girl as well. A girl who has wins over Namajunas, the current champion, not Rose Namajunas, has a loss to her she slammed her on her head, did a crazy suplex and slammed her, and she beat her. So she's not a low level girl. She's a strong girl. Shevchenko made light work of her, but she couldn't do that with Jennifer Maia. Jennifer Maia on any given day, outside the current champion, anybody outside, she can beat anybody in that division on any given day outside the current champion. So she's like a girl. She's right now, she's in the top 3 of that division as far as one of the better and best fighters of that. So I think there's still good value at -200. She could be a bigger favorite, especially when they're on 2 different trajectories of their career. Jessica I just started her fans only page. What does that tell you? She doesn't see her future nobody would ever, if they saw themselves being a future champion or even had a chance at making a run for the title, they would never ever put themselves in a position where they have to open a fans only page. That's what girls do when they're on their way out. And they are, so she's already got 1 foot out the door. She didn't have a good performance against Joanne Calderwood, and Joanne Calderwood got defeated by 2 people that she's coming off some losses against people that are low level as well. So when you're getting beat by, and I do think that she did get robbed in her last fight. Joanne Calderwood should have won, but she still made it a close enough fight with Murphy that she allowed the judges to take it out of her mouth like that. So that's her fault. She should have been able to finish the fight. But anyway, so that goes to show that there's levels to it, and this woman should be a bigger favorite than she already is. So that's one of my confident picks of the night as well. But going back to the main event, the other major thing is, if you look, Conor messed up big. Conor in his besides the first Dustin Poirier fight, and we have to go and remind ourselves, that's a completely different door. Poirier's game keeps evolving after every fight, but around the time after he beat Duffy, when he won his fight against Duffy, I think he had capitalized on some counters, and he had exposed some weaknesses and holes in Dustin's game, because whatever he did after that fight was a new version. Now he does the shoulder roll, the thing that Mayweather is known and famous for, and one of the reasons why they call him the best defensive striker of our era, he's of all time. They say because he uses tactics like the shoulder roll and shift. Dustin does those things very well, and that deflects power. So even if he doesn't fully block your punch, it takes a lot of the power away from the punch when it does land. It doesn't land flush and precisely where they were trying to throw it. And so using his shoulder roll now, and also doing his shifting, and the most important thing is his counter defense. When he's countering is something he used to never do when he was around his 145 days, because there aren't many big knockout artists in that division, I guess, and he just hadn't evolved. He was still very young. He used to he wouldn't counter. What he would do is just ball up, cover. He does like what Justin Gaethje used to do. before he kind of like, before Trevor started to get in his head to tell him to stop doing it. Gaethje was known as like a guy who would just ball up, take all your shots, and then come back with his own. It was almost like he would take turns trying to exchange, and while the guy was loading and striking and going all out crazy, all he was doing is covering up, waiting for the stop, for the punches to stop, so that he can now go. And that doesn't help you stay in healthy, good shape for a long time. So your longevity for your career, it gets compromised. You start to get punch drunk. You lose points on the scorecard. You make fights too close. You get in risk because they're only 4-ounce gloves. So even when you're covering up, it's not like boxing. It's not like what Mayweather so when you're trained by boxers and boxing coaches, they do tell you to do that. But if you were an MMA coach, you would tell your fighter never do that, because they still, big punches will still get through and affect and damage you and hurt you and count as points against you if you're covering up with 4-ounce gloves. UFC gloves are not made to protect you from punches. That's not what they're. That's why it's known as more of a barbaric sport and a hardcore and fun sport than boxing. It's one of the reasons that makes it so exciting, and we see so much more damage and bloodshed and people like covering the mat and the octagon with blood, is because of the such a small ounce glove that they wear. But the other mistake that Conor, out of all his fights, what has he got? Let me see. Conor has like altogether, I think he's got, let's see. So besides Dustin Poirier, in every one of his fights, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, out of like almost 15 fights in the UFC, almost, it's like 13, whatever, he's lost every southpaw fighter he's ever fought. Nate Diaz, he lost to the first time they fought, he was a southpaw. He has never beat a southpaw except for the 145-pound version, less evolved, the older version of Dustin Poirier, who he got into his head. So he had already won the fight. It had nothing to do with what he did in southpaw. The fight was over before it started because he was mentally exhausted from the buildup, similar to what Jose Aldo happened to Jose Aldo, which got him starched in 13 seconds. But besides that, he has never won against a southpaw. Southpaw versus southpaw is very dangerous for the guy who's the more traditional. See, now, not only has Conor never faced a guy with his skills, with his movement, but Dustin's a very unorthodox southpaw. So he's not a normal southpaw. He does things that are different and more creative than your normal average southpaw. He's very advanced, very high levels. Like when he makes his shifts and he steps in from the position and angle of a orthodox fighter. So now you're thinking he's a southpaw. He's not going to come from this area. I'm free. This is the area where I don't have to keep my hands up and block from. And that's where he starts to throw from. So he uses a lot of fakes and feints and switching from this angle to that angle and that position to that position that is not typical of your normal southpaw. His movement's very different and awkward and hard to predict, and he's got some of the best feints. Like he'll do the same feint over a couple times, and then once you think that you figured out what he's going to do the third time, he'll do something completely different the next time. So he'll transition from strike level change to a takedown. After the first 2 times he didn't try takedowns, he was giving you like a kick or a punch. Then the next time he looks like he's setting up that same exact kick using the same exact angles and stuff that he was doing to set it up. Then he'll not do it and he'll go in for a takedown instead. So he's very hard to predict and frustrating for anybody. So he was even landing clean on Khabib. There's a reason why this guy is one of the only guys to ever submit Max Holloway, and he's one of the only guys that almost, I don't want to say almost, but he's the only guy to ever slap on a submission to Khabib. If you remember, the commentators were even saying, oh my God, this is bad, Khabib could be in trouble, he's got it sunk in. He put him in like a guillotine. Nobody had ever put a submission on him. So that just shows the level of confidence, how high level, how confident and sure he is of himself to go into the ground game and try to submit a guy who's known for being one of the best in that realm. So I know that one is a black belt, the other is a brown belt, but that guy's a true black belt. He's not your ordinary black belt. He's got the levels above Conor on the ground, and Conor's a guy who's shown that going to the ground, once he's on the ground, he has a pretty good get up game. But other than that, if you have him like somewhere in the middle of the octagon or far away from the cage, he can't stand back up with his back against the cage. If you find a way to get him down somewhere in the middle, he becomes like a fish out of water. He turned over and gave his back to a black belt like Diaz, and it took Diaz seconds, even full of sweat and blood, and from getting exhausted after 3 or 4 rounds, he was still able to lock it in nice and secure. That's really hard usually in a fight where you guys are both worn out, back and forth knockdowns and sweating and bleeding all over the place, and he still was able to easily secure it. And just like in the Khabib fight, Khabib didn't even get a chance to slap it on correctly. It was like a neck crank before he can get his hooks on and his under his neck. He was only like around his chin area and trying to get under his neck. Before he can even get under his neck while he was still on his chin, Conor was already tapping out. And that's why Khabib always says, as soon as he's a tap machine and they're very fast, as soon as you put him in an awkward position, they tap right away, him and his whole team. So that's the reason where he got that from. Because, and he's true, once you're in the tap fast club, when you're in that club, it's usually once a quick tapper, always a quick tapper. So he's hard to trust on the ground. And there's a reason why, like even Poirier himself, I was very surprised when I saw the prop bet plus 800 for Dustin Poirier to get a submission, win by submission. It could be in any round, fifth round or first round, doesn't matter, is plus 800. And if you look at his most recent interview with Megan O'Leary that happened less than 24 hours ago, just a few hours ago, they released a interview with Megan O'Leary. They were sitting on a couch and stuff. He said at the end that he sees himself submitting. When she asked, how do you see this playing out? What do you think is going to happen? He said, I see myself submitting him, because that goes to show you what his game plan is. The last time I heard somebody say that in an interview, it was on the Khabib card, and it was Lauren Murphy. She had never had a submission win in her life, and she said, I'm fighting against the girl who I chose. I know she had chosen her opponent. She hand selected that opponent that she wanted to fight. She must have saw some holes in her game. Lilia Chapeau, something. She was a newcomer, very small, very slow, low-level fighter. So Lauren Murphy made it known in more than one interview, I heard her say she wanted to win by submission because she was renewing her contract and she wanted to look like she was well-rounded and worth more, so that when she renews her contract, she gets a better contract. So I played plus 675 odds. So it was even almost so this one is even better, which makes no sense. So Lauren Murphy had 0 wins by submission in her record, and they only made it a plus 600 for her to win by submission, plus 675. So I played that based off of what I heard her say her game plan was, and knowing that nobody else would have ever thought of playing that because they've never seen her use that. But lo and behold, she got a submission win, and that cashed in inside a parlay. I posted it on my Twitter. You can still see it on my Twitter around October. And if you go back to the month of October of that year, you'll find the bet slips for that. It was in a 2 or 3 legger that was paying out like minus 1,300 or something, or plus 1,300. Anyways, back on track. What were we saying? Oh yeah, so him telling us that he sees himself doing that, and that shows that this time he's not gonna waste any time, and he knows that the leg kicks won't work, and that he'll probably be more aggressive and more back to his older MMA ways, where he was fighting better as an MMA fighter and not so much traditional boxing approach. So he doesn't want to mess around with them, even though he'll be able to withstand the strikes and probably be durable enough to go into the later rounds and then start to pick him apart and put him away. He probably wants to do an impressive performance without absorbing any punishment. He's probably going to try to make this a boring, safe dominating performance, and that's probably his goal. That's going to be his focus this time, not just to get the win, but get it in an impressive fashion where he just lets there be no especially when you're 1-1 with a guy, you don't want to win the third fight, the rubber match. You don't want it to be a super close fight where somebody can say, like the Volkanovski and Holloway fight till today, people want him to keep fighting again and again and again. And that's not, and they shouldn't, and Holloway never even won that fight one time. So imagine if somebody had won that fight, they would be bothering him, the Dana White and the matchmakers and Max Holloway and his management team would still be on a daily basis, and the fans would be pestering him about it. But this is a situation where Dustin knows that he cannot let it be a close fight. He wants to fight for the championship next. That's also going to hold, even though he's going to get it no matter, as long as he wins, he's going to get that. It doesn't have to be impressive even, but he knows that he wants to look good and deserving of fighting for the championship, and knowing that Khabib was so dominant, a guy who's known for never losing rounds. I know that Dustin, if he's going to fill those type of shoes, if he's going to have to try to step out of those shadows and, not be that guy who's, he's only the champ because Khabib, he's got to look as impressive and dominant as possible so that people don't look at him as just like a paper champ. He's going to be more of a deserving champ. They'll be like, wow, he was able to do to Conor what nobody else did, not even Khabib. Because Khabib, it took him until the 4th round to submit him. But in my opinion, I think you could have done it sooner than that. But he told people that he wanted to punish him and not finish him right away. He was going to punish him first because it was personal. But if he can do it before Khabib did, he knows that'll help a lot in getting him out of that shadow and out of those shoes that he's got to fill. Will be a lot easier to fill them. So I expect him to try. And if you're he's a guy who against southpaws, he's undefeated. He's never lost against a southpaw besides to Conor. But in this division, in this way, actually, just in general, in every fight of his ever, he's never lost against a southpaw besides that one fight with Conor. Every other one, he's got like 6 fights just in the UFC alone, 5 or 6 fights. He's 6-0, and almost all of them by finish, submission, KO, triangle. So he's got finishes, and he's undefeated because, again, for Dustin, this is the most perfect style matchup. His movement, his shifting, his everything, his kicking, because if you're not a southpaw fighting another southpaw, orthodox people have a lot of trouble and get themselves in a lot of risks and danger trying to throw a low kick to the calf. It's very dangerous if you're not a southpaw fighting another southpaw. If you're a southpaw fighting an orthodox stance fighter, it's more work and more harder and more dangerous for you to try to land a low kick as opposed to a person who's orthodox. So that's more convenient. This style, this opponent is going to play in perfectly for Dustin because of his style. This is a perfect matchup. And for Conor, it's a night. He should have never gone back to, he should have never accepted a fight against a southpaw. He's never done good against him. His whole resume, you'll notice, he's only had success and knockouts and stuff against orthodox stance fighters. The only other one that he ever came close to having success with was Nate Diaz, but that's a guy who's like, he's a 500 record fighter. He's got tons of losses. He's never going to be like a champion. He's never going to be that top 2, top 3 guy. He's just known for his entertaining fights and his charisma and die-hard warrior spirit fighting mentality. So he's a fun fighter, but he's never going to be like a future champion, a guy who's reigning as a dominant champion type of fighter. So and again, he couldn't dispose of him. He didn't get rid of him. He didn't have like a 13-second knockout. He didn't have like an Eddie Alvarez performance. It was a bloody, bloodshed fight that was back and forth, and it came to like a split decision type of a win. It was ultra close. And in the first fight, he even lost. So again, he's never really had any success at all besides Nate and that 45-pound version of Poirier. So we have to go with the guy who's got 6-0 or 6-1 because you got to count the Conor fight, but who's 6-1 and mostly finishes against other southpaws. When you're comparing who's the style that's the most convenient and who's got the advantage in the better styles, the more well-roundedness, not just on the ground. I'm speaking. He's the more well-rounded striker as well. His striking is more suitable for southpaw versus southpaw. He's got more tools, more weapons he can use. More dangerous to Conor than he is. Conor's got a good left hand, and that's pretty much the only danger he's got to avoid is that big left hand. He's like the Darren Till of that division in a sense, but maybe Darren Till's that's a pretty good analogy, metaphor. Okay, for many other reasons, the size discrepancy, the physiques. Go look at that picture where Conor has his arms around Dustin in the second stare downs or ceremonial weigh-ins, stare downs, face-offs, whatever. In the second one, he was putting his arm over Dustin and holding the Louisiana hot sauce bottle. Look at the huge difference that was after the official scales, after they started filling back up. He was like 3 weight sizes bigger. That's why, again, he fight at 170 because then he knows he'll come in closer to 205 light heavyweights like size. He's just got that structure since they were kids. If you compare pictures of him in high school and Conor in high school, one looks like a wide receiver, another one looks like a tackle from front, offensive front line tackle. He was a big guy. He looked very full and like his density and mass was a lot bigger. They looked like Conor was maybe half that size. So they are different in the sense of natural sizes, and they have two different capacities and limitations to how big they can come in on fight night. So when the cage is closed, when it's time to fight, the last fight of the night on a card that starts late, finally, and like the previous card that was 5 a.m, early start, they didn't give him as much time to keep filling back up, and that's not his accustomed time. Where it was more convenient for Conor as well, by the way, because it's the same time zone or similar time zone to Ireland as that. So I think it's much closer in time to where he resides than it would be. So the jet lag would not have been. So Conor would not have jet lag, but Dustin was gonna have jet lag because the time differences were flipped. So it's like waking somebody up at 4 a.m. in Chicago and saying, go fight a guy who's just woke up at 8 a.m. where he's from. So you take a guy who's like at 5 or 6 o'clock in the evening, and then you wake up a guy who's at 5 or 6 o'clock in the morning, and then they bring them together. That's kind of what happens. So more reasons why this fight should be even less competitive. And we should see him probably be able to have not just more success in the sense of like finishing him. So he may not finish Conor as fast, or he may not even finish him at all, but he'll use a more dominant, it will be even a more lopsided, one-sided dominant performance. So that could mean that he starts to use his wrestling and starts to dominate him and hold him against the cage, or put him on the ground and keep him there and use position over submission until something opens up. It's just a lot. Even he said it himself, there's a lot of different ways he can get the win. Leg kicks doesn't have to even be one of the methods. And another good thing Dustin did I really like is his coaches. He comes from one of the best teams in the world. His coach is probably in the conversations of being the top 2 or top 3 best coaches of all time for MMA. Genius, smart mind, great fighters under his belt, reign as a coach. So he's got him working on checking leg kicks more than even throwing them. So he made it repetitive, natural for now Dustin, just in case Conor, he wants to be one step ahead of him. Just in case Conor comes with a very similar game plan, because again, southpaw to southpaw, those leg kicks will be available for them in case he decides that he wants to be the one that uses it against him now that it's dawned on him that the evolution of MMA while he was gone, because that's the problem with inactivity, and Conor said it himself. The difference was that he was inactive in their last post-fight conference after the second fight. He said that Dustin was very active and I was not, and that was what made the biggest difference, which he's right, along with many. That was just one problem. There was a lot of other reasons as well in addition to that, but he was right about that being one of the problems. And one of those issues is gonna what was the point we were trying to get to? Oh yeah, so they've used like every possible scenario of what they expect Conor to come in with. They're trying to project what kind of plans he's gonna come up with. So if he uses that as one of his weapons that he wants to use against Dustin, Dustin will be prepared for it, because they made him repetitively for hours, days on, practice just checking those leg kicks. So I expect that to be not a problem for him in case Conor gets any ideas of trying that against him. So I do trust him to be prepared for that, along with other possibilities. So again, he's training for the best version. I know for a fact that even if they don't think Conor is going to be the same guy or the better version of himself, or they'll still be ready for that in case it's what happens. In case he's the best version of himself, that's who they're going to prepare for. All right, guys, so recap really quickly. I got Jennifer Maia beating Jessica Ai, and I got also Dustin Poirier beating Conor McGregor. And both Dustin Poirier and Jennifer Maia, you can learn a lot more information about them on my previous breakdowns of them. If you look up those old videos, there's a lot of important information that will be relevant for this fight for both of them, and then you'll see why I think that they should both be much bigger favorites. When we seen Conor try to adapt and make a new stance, it's almost like somebody starts all over again as a white belt. When you're not comfortable and you're not using your natural stance that you've developed and learned and evolved since you started, your career and training. If you start all over and try to use a new stance because you think that the old one is gonna get your legs be vulnerable. Now, he was better off, like when I started to notice in his training videos, he's using a new stance. Conor showed me that he's got the wrong game plan going into this fight. He was better off keeping his old stance and just making adjustments to it and evolving it, making better movement patterns and repetitive type of movement to avoid and evade that type of damage, like, lifting it up so it can go duck under it. He can jump over it, or he can check it in a different. He's got to make himself be comfortable and do what he did that got him to the show and that got him his success, and just evolve it, not break it down and start from scratch. Because now, like, he could do that while working on that, still use the old stance, but it's a real bad idea if he comes into this fight using a new stance he's never used before for the first time. If he wants to use something new, he won't be comfortable. It won't be natural for him. Where Dustin's already used his stance, his movement for so long that it'll work, and it'll be working more like a smooth oiled machine, as opposed to Conor's, who's still going to be like at the trial and error stages of it, where he's not so comfortable and he's got to think more about what he's going to do as opposed to just naturally flowing with it. And that's a big no, and that's a big disadvantage. That's dangerous for anybody who's doing that against the guy who's going to be fluid and comfortable with his movement while you're not. That's too big. That's another very big advantage Conor will have to pay heavily for giving Dustin. So I hope he's not foolish enough to try to go into this fight and practice using a new stance. He would be better off using the old one that he was good at, that before it evolved into the new MMA it is today, and just make it a better version of it and find ways to work around the problem using that stance that he's comfortable. He became who he is. He's got success. He became a double champ. He became, a legend, a Hall of Famer, all from using that stance. So it's not that the stance wasn't the problem. It was the movement with it. It was the other small things that he needed to adjust. So he's going about it the wrong way from what I see. But I don't know. We'll see on the last fight. If you remember, I told you guys, if you go into the last breakdown, I have a timestamp in the comment section. It'll jump you right to it. There's two different parts. Like one was 26 minutes and the other one was 32 minutes into the video. I told you guys that because Conor is a quick starter, Dustin's a slow starter, you should be ready to live bet on Dustin by the end of the first round. If he made it out of the first round, he would be a huge underdog, like plus 600, 900, something like that. And that you can rest assured that after the first round, when he starts to get comfortable, he's had the feeling out process down packed, and he is now no longer doing the feeling out process or gauging his distance, and he's finally comfortable, and he's going to start to pick up the pace and be more offensive. That's going to be around the same time we'll notice Conor is starting to fade away, and it's going to be super dangerous. Like I told you, it was going to be also a mind F to Conor while he's noticing himself fading. He's going to see his opponent increasing, so that's going to be something that's going to start to get him to panic and get desperate and make foolish moves, especially if he's using a new stance he's not comfortable with. He's going to look like a white belt. It's going to look like a fight that should never have been like the last fight we got. It's going to be even less competitive. In the second round, it's going to be one-sided. And just like I said in my last video, it'll be very dangerous for Conor. For the longer the fight goes, the more dangerous it's going to be for him. So in that sense, like again, if you go back to my older videos, some of those things I said will still apply. It'd probably benefit you to see that video as well. All right, good luck on your bets today, guys. I hope you win a lot of money. Hit the bell notifications if you haven't. This is another example of why it's important to have the bell notifications. Time is money. These things can influence who you're betting on and how much they're valued at. By the time you see this video, the lines could have moved. So hit the notifications. And if you can help me out, this is a free video. I don't get paid for this, guys. I do it out of generosity and kindness in my heart to see you guys do well. I would appreciate paying it back by leaving a comment. Nothing big, just a short, couple of words, whatever you want to say, something short and sweet, or short and mean, whatever. I'm not sensitive. I got thick skin, so lay it on me. Yeah, hit the likes, the thumbs up, please. If we get to like 60, 75 likes, I'll give you a sneaky prop bet, a plus money prop bet, which is my specialty. I usually go like 9-1, 10-0. I've got, if you look at my pinned, if you go to my Patreon, I have a pinned, my Holland and Brunson card, for example. We did 10 prop bets, all cashed in, 10-0. And there was like plus 500s, plus 300. So I don't think anybody in the history has ever done 10 prop bets and got all 10 to cash in. And they were not like, over 2.5 rounds. They were specific. Like every one of them had the method of victory and the choice of who would win. So I had to get all the correct winners and the method of they would win by. But one of them was crazy because it was like 2 seconds left for the round to finish, and he got the knockout or submission. I forgot what it was. So like one of them was 2 seconds away from not cashing in, but it cashed in. All right, guys, thank you for your time. See you on the next video. Good luck, make some money, and have fun watching the fights, most important. See you when I see you.